Hello and welcome to Hello all and welcome to 5 tips to improve your landscape painting. Today, this week, I wanted to improve my skills as well as yours, so I went to a more pro than me landscape artist, and figured I would get some new insights into artist methodology and hear some new voices. For that, I went to the tutorials of one Andrew Tishler. Andrew has been on the social medias, he has a prominent place, and he's here on the YouTubes making tutorials, showing tips and tools. It turns out that him and I have a number of similar concerns or things we think about when we're making our work. But his painting this last video, a plein air video, was particularly gorgeous and insightful, and so I thought I would take some of his ideas from that and turn them into a number of tips for me and for you to improve our landscapes and chew on. So let us do that. Tip number 1, paint back to front. In his most recent video, Andrew specifically referred to using this methodology to approach plein air or outdoor painting, but I did watch other videos where he utilized the same technique, and it makes sense to me. It's something if I've done it naturally, I haven't utilized it consciously in my painting making. As I watched Andrew talk, he seemed to approach his painting in zones, having different technique or tonal range, detail inclusion, atmospheric cue to each of the zones he was working on, and treating the background in a way very specific to its distance. Approaching a scene by painting what is furthest away first seems to situate your brain in a way to think about the physical distance of your scene, keeping you mindful of the three-dimensional component of what you are working on. Number 2, beginning in low amounts of detail. Low detail. This is something I often recommend to viewers, so it's kind of cool seeing another established artist with a similar technique. This piece of advice is about blocking in your colors, values, and shapes in your composition so you can cover ground and establish form and perspective right from the start of your painting. Beginning in low detail allows you to look at the composition in a holistic way, so that you don't get lost in the details or step too quickly into applying high contrast or saturation. Exploring your full tonal range too quickly can hurt your illusionary perspective. Tonal range is a concept that Andrew talked about recurrently in his videos. We'll discuss it more in our tips, but for now I will repeat his encouragement when blocking in. Use this stage as a tonal base upon which you can use your foundation to layer up and then increase your depth, range, and color. 3. Create muted perspective. The key to this tip is beginning your landscape with subtle and less saturated colors in its distant features. A range of mountains will lighten and soften in appearance as the hills fade out into more distant places, and they will be overlapped by the effect the atmosphere has on the appearance of those distant objects. Decreases in clarity, value, color, saturation mark this distance, so a slow approach to introducing warmth and color into your background features is encouraged. As a tip, Andrew encourages something like burnt sienna may be a more appropriate color to mix in to achieve warmth in your background than something like yellow. However you decide that you want to achieve your color mixes, work with an awareness of subtle color development so you can avoid blowing out your depth. This idea will play into our next tip, so let's build that information. Number 4, save your tonal range. Talking about tonal range is actually something that's completely new to me. I was really excited when I heard Andrew's articulation on the subject because I think it's helpful for contemplation and it informed the way I approached painting this week. So I will do my best to describe the concept. Your tonal range encompasses the range in lights and darks in your image. This brightness to darkness spectrum includes color hues as well as shades, contrasting shades. Color and luminosity are amongst the most important tools you have to demonstrate depth of field, so you want to make sure you reserve using your darkest darks, lightest lights, and brightest, most vibrant colors for your foreground and final detailing marks. When painting, think of preserving midtones and mixing your lights and darks in interesting ways, finding more subtle color shifts and vibrance. Then you can build your way toward the foreground, increasing defined edges, color saturation, and contrast. To cite some of Andrew's words on the matter, he suggests that painters hold back and save their tonal best for last. He explains that creating light is about control, a limited tonal dynamic, and saving your highlights for the end. Keeping a relatively muted base to build on will save you the ability to later add highlights and shadows, and even lightly textured paint so that you can create a final emphasis of bright brilliance. Number 5, finding balance. Find balance. This tip deals with developing your painterly style. The reason I include it is because it deals with a surprising overlap of concerns that both Andrew and I have as landscape artists, so I figure it might play out for you as well. As you work your way in your composition forward, gradually building up detail and saturation, consider your personal line with realism and artistic license. This is the finding balance. Here's where a painting can really come into itself and you can come through as an artist. As painters, Andrew and I both straddle an interesting line where we like hyperrealism and also want to explore painterly expressiveness in the work. So finding the right balance of these two things will evolve yours and our relationship as we continue to make each of our paintings, and it can be a driving goal to strike that balance in our landscape work. How explicit you get in your inclusion of defined detail versus implied detail, how tight your mark making is, how personally you approach your work is going to vary. The relationships we have with our subjects, renderings, and others' work in our fields, that's how we distinguish ourselves as painters and create personal relationships with our scenes. So you need to look for your personal balance in this component. Building a landscape painting takes structural information into concern. You're working with light, form, composition, perspective, illusion to create a readable scene. By internalizing some of these tips, you are likely to inform your practice in unexpected ways. And while there's so many ways to go about painting an image, taking on some of the pointers and trying other artists' methods is a great way to challenge format and build knowledge or aims to be considering in your artwork. So this week, while you are looking at the landscape or starting a new painting, I want you to remember these tips and keep them in mind for your personal study. Number 1, we're running through them again. Try painting back to front. It might shift the way that you think about color and detail when building depth. 2, begin with low detail. Block out your composition. Make sure your structural and tonal base give you a solid foundation. 3, create muted perspective. Remember to mute distant colors and be conservative in color choice when you are suggesting warmth and dimension when viewed at an atmospheric distance. Number 4, save your tonal range. Preserve contrast and saturation for your foreground areas with exceptional brights and use those for depth and dimension in the uppermost paint layers that you're applying. 5, find balance. Strike your personal chord at the land and find where you bring your personal touch into its depiction as an artist. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to support, you can buy these paintings at robinsealark.com. You can subscribe and watch videos. You can follow me on any social media account at robinsealark, or you can follow me on Patreon for a monthly contribution and some nice little perks at robinsealark. Yeah, patreon.com/robinsealark. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, I will see you in the very next video. Goodbye.